tensions in the South China Sea have entered a new and more dangerous phase after a dramatic military exercise sent a direct strategic message to China. In a move that military analysts are calling highly symbolic, a retired Philippine Navy vessel was sunk by a Japanese Type 88 anti-ship missile during large-scale joint military drills involving Allied forces in the Indo-Pacific. The exercise was not just another military display. It represented a major shift in regional security dynamics and highlighted how countries in the region are rapidly strengthening military coordination in response to China's growing presence in disputed waters. The drills took place during the massive Balikatan military exercises, an annual defense cooperation program led by the Philippines and the United States. But this year's exercises carried extraordinary significance because Japan participated in a far more active combat role than ever before. For the first time since World War II, Japanese forces launched head anti-ship missiles from foreign soil. The target was the BRP Quezon, a retired Philippine Navy vessel positioned in waters facing the South China Sea. Within moments, the missile strike destroyed the ship, creating one of the most closely watched military demonstrations in Asia this year. Military experts believe the message behind the operation was unmistakable. The drill showed that Japan is no longer limiting itself to a purely defensive posture. Instead, Tokyo is increasingly preparing to work alongside allies in potential regional conflicts involving key maritime routes and strategic waterways. The missile launch took place from northern Luzon in the Philippines, an area located close to the Luzon Strait, one of the most strategically important sea passages in the world. The strait connects the South China Sea to the Pacific Ocean and is considered critical in any future conflict involving Taiwan or Chinese naval expansion into the Pacific. For years, China has steadily expanded its military presence across the South China Sea. Beijing has built artificial islands, deployed military infrastructure, increased naval patrols, and asserted sweeping territorial claims over waters also claimed by several Southeast Asian countries. Those actions have alarmed neighboring states and pushed regional powers closer together. Japan, the Philippines, and the United States are now strengthening military cooperation at a pace that would have seemed unlikely only a decade ago. The latest exercise demonstrated just how far that cooperation has evolved. Japanese ground self-defense force troops fired the Type 88 anti-ship missile, while senior defense officials from both Japan and the Philippines observed the operation. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. also monitored the drill remotely, underlining its political and strategic importance. The Type 88 missile itself is designed specifically to destroy enemy naval vessels. It has a range capable of threatening ships' move, e.g., through narrow maritime choke points, making it highly effective in coastal defense operations. That is why the location of the exercise mattered so much. By firing anti-ship missiles near the Luzon Strait, Allied forces effectively demonstrated how they could potentially restrict naval movement through one of the most important waterways in the Indo-Pacific during a future crisis. Military analysts say the exercise was aimed at showing China that allied nations are preparing to operate together in a coordinated regional defense network. The broader military drills involved thousands of troops from several countries, including the United States, Japan, Australia, Canada, France, and New Zealand. Advanced missile systems, naval assets, surveillance aircraft, and amphibious units participated in the exercises. One of the central goals was to improve interoperability, the ability of allied militaries to operate seamlessly together during real-world military operations. That interoperability has become increasingly important as concerns grow over the possibility of a future conflict involving Taiwan or escalating confrontations in the South China Sea. China views Taiwan as part of its territory and has repeatedly warned that it could use force, if necessary, to bring the island under Beijing's control. At the same time, Chinese vessels continue operating aggressively in disputed maritime areas, leading to repeated confrontations with Philippine ships. Those confrontations have significantly influenced Manila's defense strategy. Under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the Philippines has adopted a much firmer approach toward Chinese maritime activities compared to previous administrations. Manila has expanded military cooperation with Washington, granted greater access to Philippine bases for American forces, and deepened security partnerships with Japan and Australia. Japan's role in this growing alliance network is especially significant because of its historical background. After World War II, Japan adopted a pacifist constitution that limited its military activities largely to self-defense. For decades, Tokyo avoided offensive military deployments and maintained strict restrictions on overseas combat operations. But the regional security environment has changed dramatically. China's expanding military power, North Korea's missile programs, and rising tensions around Taiwan have pushed Japan toward a more assertive security posture. Tokyo has increased defense spending, strengthened missile capabilities, eased restrictions on military exports, and expanded security cooperation with allies across the Indo-Pacific. The missile strike during the recent exercise reflected that transformation. For many observers, it symbolized Japan's emergence as a more active strategic player in regional security affairs. The symbolism was even more powerful because the missile destroyed a Philippine vessel during a coordinated multinational exercise. It demonstrated a level of military trust and operational coordination that would once have been politically unimaginable in Asia. The operation also highlighted the growing importance of the so-called First Island Chain. This strategic defensive line stretches from Japan through Taiwan and the Philippines. Military planners in Washington and allied capitals consider the chain critical for containing Chinese naval expansion into the Pacific Ocean. If conflict were ever to break out in the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea, the islands along this chain could become crucial military positions. That is why anti-ship missile systems are receiving so much attention. Modern coastal missile batteries can threaten large naval fleets operating near strategic waterways. Instead of relying entirely on expensive warships, countries can deploy mobile missile systems capable of striking enemy vessels from land-based positions. The Type 88 missile used in the exercise represents exactly that kind of capability. Combined with American missile systems deployed in northern Philippine areas during the drills, the exercise effectively simulated how Allied forces could establish overlapping defensive zones across key maritime corridors. From Beijing's perspective, that creates a serious strategic challenge. China possesses one of the world's largest naval forces, but controlling nearby seas becomes much harder if hostile missile systems can target ships moving through narrow passages such as the Luzon Strait. That is one reason why China reacted strongly to the exercise. Chinese officials accused Japan and its allies of escalating regional tensions and increasing military confrontation in Asia. Beijing also criticized the deployment of missile systems near Taiwan-facing areas, warning against what it described as attempts to contain China. But allied governments insist the exercises are defensive. Officials from participating countries argue that the drills are designed to preserve regional stability, maintain freedom of navigation, and deter aggressive actions in disputed waters. The timing of the exercise also added to its significance. Regional tensions have been steadily rising over the past few years. Chinese Coast Guard vessels and maritime militia ships have repeatedly confronted Philippine boats near contested reefs and shoals in the South China Sea. At the same time, military pressure around Taiwan has intensified, with Chinese aircraft and warships operating near the island on an increasingly regular basis. As a result, countries across the Indo-Pacific are preparing more seriously for potential regional crises. The recent exercises demonstrated that those preparations are becoming increasingly coordinated and multinational. One of the most important aspects of the drill was its visibility. Unlike earlier decades, when military coordination against China often remained discreet, the missile strike was highly publicized. Images of the missile launch and the sinking of the ship circulated widely across international media platforms. That visibility was intentional. The operation was designed not only to improve military readiness, but also to send a deterrent message by publicly showcasing coordinated missile capabilities and alliance cooperation. Participating nations wanted to demonstrate that any attempt to dominate critical waterways or use force against regional neighbors would face a united response. The participation of Japan carried especially powerful symbolism. For many Asian countries, memories of Japan's wartime military expansion remain deeply sensitive. Yet today, nations such as the Philippines increasingly view Japanese military cooperation as a stabilizing force rather than a threat. That shift reflects how dramatically the regional balance of power has changed. China's rapid military growth has encouraged former rivals to strengthen partnerships that were once politically difficult. The growing Japan-Philippines relationship is now one of the clearest examples of that transformation. Tokyo and Manila are already discussing expanded defense cooperation, including possible transfers of military equipment and surveillance assets. Joint military exercises are becoming more frequent, while intelligence sharing and maritime coordination are also increasing. The latest missile exercise pushed that partnership into a new phase. For defense analysts, the sinking of the retired Philippine vessel was never simply about destroying an old ship. It was about demonstrating readiness, coordination, and deterrence. More importantly, it showed that the Indo-Pacific security environment is rapidly evolving into a network of interconnected alliances designed to counterbalance China's growing military influence. And that may have been the most important message of all. The exercise demonstrated that China may no longer face isolated regional rivals acting independently. Instead, Beijing is increasingly confronting a coalition of counting. Tries willing to coordinate militarily, share strategic responsibilities, and prepare jointly for potential crises. Whether this growing alliance network stabilizes the region or pushes tensions even higher remains uncertain. But one thing is clear, the sinking of that Philippine ship was not just a military drill, it was a warning signal echoing across the South China Sea.